folks, Casey here. Welcome back to the channel. When the folks at BestArc reached out to me to review their 50 amp plasma cutter, I hadn't heard of them. And as you know, I'm no stranger to plasma cutting. Anyway, be that as it may, I looked these guys up and I was shocked to see that BestArc, particularly the 7th generation BTC 500 DP machine that I'm reviewing here, is the #1 bestseller in plasma cutting tools and equipment on Amazon right now. And that's no feat easily accomplished. They've sold over 1,000 of these units in the last month, so that tells you that they're doing something right. The BestArc BTC 500 DP is in their 7th generation. It's a pilot arc machine, 50 amps, dual voltage. You can run it on 220 and 110. It's an inverter machine with IGBT inverter technology. That means it's small and lightweight, probably weighs about 10 to 15 pounds, and packs a punch, as you're about to see. The 7th generation machine also has a full digital display on it. It's got a pressure sensor, which is easily set with a readout. We'll get into all that in the review. I'm going to put an Amazon Associates link to this in the description of this video. So if you are in the market for an inexpensive plasma cutter, please be sure to check out that link. I'll earn like 3% and that'll really help me out. Without further ado, let's get into the review.
Okay, time for a voiceover here. This is the box as you receive it. It's got a thick plastic wrap on it to help protect the internal components. We'll get that cut off of here. Box is well taped. There's lots of foam insulation inside. It's die cut foam, so the plasma cutter unit itself is really tight in here. Here comes the plasma cutter, completely covered on all sides with foam. They just put a ton of foam in this package, and it's a double layer cardboard box as well. All right, so this is the box with our torch and all of our extra components. Let's go ahead and get this open. Got an air line. Got our ground clamp set up. Got our power adapter to go from 220 to 110. Got some extra consumables and some Teflon tape. It's always nice to get extra consumables. All right, here's our torch. Nice thick casing on this torch should keep the wires and the air line from getting damaged. Got a consumable wrench. And an instruction booklet. Right, get the plasma cutter unit itself out of the bag here. Everything is just really well packed. This is a light little machine. It's only about, I guess, 12 pounds. And this is kind of fun. The air regulator and fitting are already installed. Usually that's something you have to do, so it's nice to have that. Got all of our hookups on the front, got our air control, and it looks like a digital readout as well. It's a good looking unit. Here's a shot of the information sticker. All right, sweet.
Hey folks, Casey here. I'd like to take a quick moment to appeal to you guys to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if anything has intrigued you and you want to jump into the conversation, leave a comment on this video too. The YouTube algorithm has really been crushing my reach lately, so please help me out, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you. All right, moving on to setup of the unit. Normally we'd be starting at the back, but one thing I noticed right off the bat, they've got their air fitting and regulator and water trap already all set up on this thing, which is pretty nice. You know, it's just one extra step that you don't have to do. So we can move right along to the front. Let's go ahead and pull off the protective cover. I know some people like to leave these on their machines in perpetuity. Connecting the torch is pretty straightforward. We've got our air, our pilot arc, and our torch control. So try to do this without blocking the camera. You got a little guide pin that lines up with the guide pin on the torch control. You just plug that in, thread on the collar, easy peasy. Pilot arc control is going to go here on this tab, just like so. And then our torch hookup is going to go down here on this threaded portion. Hopefully you guys can see that there. And that's it, the torch is hooked up. Last thing to do up front here would be to connect our ground lead. And that's straightforward too. This lug here just goes in and it's a quarter turn and done. And so now we're set up. All right, so we've got the unit hooked up to 220. I'm gonna bring in our air and connect that as well. No leaks, that's always nice. Go ahead and power the unit on the rear switch. And watch the LCD screen come alive here. And look at that. We're set at 66 PSI of air pressure, 15 amps. So we can increase our amperage here. Because we're hooked up to 220 power, we can go all the way up to 50 amps. I believe you're limited to 35 amps if you're on 110. Should we see how thick this thing will cut? All right, so we're gonna go ahead and zoom in here so that you can better see the readout. We've got an airflow test so we can check that their air is supplied to the machine properly, and we can check any pressure drop while the torch is on. That's sometimes important. And then we're back to cut mode there. You've got 2-touch or 4-touch mode. 2-touch mode is you pull the trigger, the arc starts, you let go of the trigger, the arc stops. 4-touch mode is you pull the trigger, the arc starts, you let go of the trigger, the arc keeps going, so you don't have to sit there and hold the trigger the entire time if you're doing a long cut, and then you press the trigger again to stop the arc. So I tend to use 2T mode, but I don't tend to do huge cuts. We've also got post-flow time, currently set to 3 seconds. One thing I always like to do is turn post-flow time up to the max. It's air, it's free. If you were using a gas that you had to pay for, maybe you wouldn't want to use as much, but more post-flow means more consumable life. You also have a pilot arc time, which is adjustable from 3 to 15 seconds as well. It looks like it's factory set at 5 seconds. I think that's a good amount of time. So we're ready to start cutting. One other thing that Best Arc includes with their plasma cutter is a cutting chart. And you know, this might not seem like a big deal, but it's actually quite helpful. So you can see here, we got 5/32 inch. They recommend 20 amps for that with 40 to 50 PSI of air pressure. 3/16, they recommend 30 amps, 40 to 50 PSI, you know, so on and so forth. That really helps. You can obviously dial your settings in from here, but if you don't really know where to start, this gets you started. And I found the cut chart suggestions to be pretty spot on. All right, so time to start cutting. This is just some 14, or maybe it's even 12 gauge material. I've got the machine set at 20 amps, 55 static air pressure, and it drops down to 45, so it's in between the 40 and 50 PSI range that they recommend. This metal is really rusty. I'm sure you can see that there on the camera. Rusty metal is a good test of a plasma cutter. So I got my eye protection. Let's go ahead and start cutting. We're just gonna take some slices off of this thing. With a hot knife through butter. And that didn't fall off because my own motion was too jerky. So let's go pass over there one more time. Well, this thing cuts pretty nice on the thin stuff. This is my first time using one of these guide clips. Keeps the torch the right distance away from the metal. It's really important when you're plasma cutting that your torch height is correct. That minimizes slag, makes sure you cut through, and increases your consumable life. This is actually my first time using these. I've always used drag tips, which are a little more expensive consumable, and they don't last quite as long. So this is a pretty cool setup. It cuts nice, man. I mean, I'm just making short work of this piece. So let's move on to some thicker stuff. All right, so here we have the head from an old engine stand, and this is painted, and it's probably like an epoxy paint, a nice thick paint. It's 3/8 of an inch thick. That's the maximum rated thickness that this machine can cut. I've got it set on 50 amps and 76 PSI, but if we press our air test button, we're at 65, which is right in between the 60 to 70 max that they recommend for this material. Let me set the camera up and we'll take a pass at it painted, and if that doesn't work, we'll grind some paint off and try it there. All right, here goes. All right, that was my own fault. It was a stutter at the start, but that's a pretty nice clean cut. Fair amount of slag, but that's probably more to do with my speed than the machine itself. Let's drop that on the ground. Let's take one more shot at this. Consumables are still looking pretty good. Let's go one more time. So you can kind of see the slag line here. It stops about there as I'm blowing through and blowing the slag off the cut. Get this damn camera to focus. I'm not a very experienced hand plasma cutter. I do most of my stuff on the CNC, but that's a pretty nice cut if you ask me, especially on the max rated thickness for this machine. All right, folks, so that just about wraps up my review of the BestArc BTC 500 DP 50 amp dual voltage 7th generation plasma cutter. That's a mouthful. I'm pretty impressed with this little unit. 3/8, like a hot knife through butter. I was cutting rusty metal and I was cutting painted metal just because I wanted to really test this thing out. I'm impressed with it. The little guide is easy to use. For the money they're asking for this thing, this is a fantastic little machine. Sure, you can spend a lot more. I absolutely have, but I don't know that you need to. The BestArc BTC 500 DP. I'm pretty impressed with mine. Hopefully you'll be impressed with yours. Thanks so much for watching today, and we'll see you next time.